Yes. Okay. And I've got my clicker. And all those things should disappear real soon. All right. I apologize for all the crap on the bottom of the screen up there for you. It's there because for whatever reason, my clicker won't work if I max screen it and hide the controls. I have no idea why the clicker, it's fun. Anyway, so hello and welcome. I'm doing well. And yes, there are toys on all the tables. They've been washed yesterday. I finally found a task that my 91-year-old mother could do and thus feel useful. I'm like, yes, finally, because she's like, I can put that up there. I'm like, yeah. So anyway, you should feel free to go ahead and do things. That is kind of what this is about, is how these things can be helpful to people. You guys want to sit at this table because there's no toys at that table.
Oh, I didn't know what was the table.
You can sit at any table, but if you sit at that table, there's no toys, and that's sad. I mean, you steal a toy from another table. Or you can go and steal toys from other tables if you want to make her not lonely. Oh, yeah, we got sloppy terminology. These are tools, not toys. And the thing is, they are. So, as I was about to say, I am Julie Love. I run the Massachusetts School Nurse Liaison Project, formerly the McLean School Nurse Liaison Project, which was funded by a grant, and then the grant ran out, and then we got funding, so now it's Massachusetts. And yay us. So I offer consultation. Has anyone heard of MCPAP, the program MCPAP? It is it's a brilliant program. Terrible acronym, great program. It is the Massachusetts Child Psychiatry Access Project that tries to make up for the dearth of child psychiatrists by letting pediatricians be able to contact a child psychiatrist. Really useful to know. So if you've got a kid that you know, the parents are like, oh yeah, we tried to get a psychiatrist and they're 6-month wait list. You can tell them, well, get in every line you can, and meanwhile, ask the pediatrician to go ahead and get started. And if they aren't comfortable, they could call MCPAP. It's nothing that you guys could call me, but it's sometimes pediatrician needs a reminder. Anyway, the corner of Massachusetts, the hospital that had the southeast corner doing MCPAP, the doctor's like, kids spend more time in schools than they do in pediatricians' offices. Maybe we could do something similar in schools. And so they did a pilot and it was popular, and then they got funding, and then they hired me to do similar. They kind of pictured that I'd be getting lots of phone calls. I'm kind of in touch with the fact that you guys do not have time to pick up the phone. So it evolves into whatever the schools want it to be. And over the last 6 years, it's been that, yes, it is a consult service. If people want to call or email me about any puzzle or mystery they have going on in their school, any behavioral thing, hey, what do I think of this med, or how do we come up with a behavior plan, or anything like that, you can absolutely contact me. Of course, you should first talk to your school nurse or counselor and so on, but they might, reach out to me to have another set of eyes on it. But I also do presentations, professional development, because that's what schools said they really actually would like to have more of. And resources, which are those slides that were going before, and which are in that thing that you can pass around. And there's one back there. This is one of the first presentations I ever did when I first started. I'm like, okay, you guys, what would you like me to be teaching about? And they're like, well, like the sensory toolbox and how to develop coping skills. Like, yes. I was new to this idea of having a corporate credit card, and I got to buy lots of cool stuff. It was so fun. So, and also how to make them and what their function is and how they can be used. I think that there's a lot of people who misuse them and a lot of people who use them just as toys and a distraction. And so we want to figure out what are all these things about, and just in general, what are emotions about? So since I do evaluations, I have to tell you about my conflicts of interest and commercial bias. I have no conflicts of interest, commercial bias. I kind of feel like I should, I totally should call any of these companies and tell them to give me freebies and free samples to show, and then, feel like Be like a drug rep, only for toys. Managing emotions, managing strong emotions, okay? We want to recognize that these are not talents. These are not reflexes. These are skills. We say coping skills because they are skills, which means they can be learned, they can be taught, and they need to be learned and taught. And we recognize how this happens, where you've got co-regulation, where you're doing a thing with someone to help them adjust their emotions. And then eventually they can do it independently. And we all use a combination of co-regulation and self-regulation. There is those times when you're so upset, the only thing that'll help is calling your sister. That's co-regulation. But if she can't answer, then you return to self-regulation. The steps to doing this is first, getting a grip on what the emotions are, recognizing your feelings, knowing, there's a lot of people to a surprising old age who live in a world of two emotions, good and bad, and two intensities, on and off, you know, and we all have days where it's like, I'm upset, and you don't even know exactly how or why, or whether it's, you know, but we want to help kids learn to name and identify what the emotions are, identify that they come in different sizes, and recognize that when they're having physical symptoms, that's their body telling them about their emotions. So step one is validating that and not saying, oh, well, it's not real. You know, if you've ever, you know, heard someone say, oh, well, he gets a stomach ache every day at 10, so I know it's not a real stomach ache. I can't wait for that nurse to come and ask me for Tylenol for their stress headache. So I can tell them, oh, but you know, your head doesn't really hurt. It's just stress. Like, you know, their stress headache hurts. And a stress stomach ache is a real stomach ache. You know, you got a stomach ache, only prerequisites for a stomach ache. Real stomach ache, real nausea, might be real puke on the floor. But if it's caused by emotions, we're going to treat it differently because we want to treat it differently. We also want to recognize what cognitive symptoms come up, how our brains change in certain situations. And once you can identify all these things, we want to develop a sense of control over them. And lots of people will say, well, I can't control it. I'm going to be mad. It's like, yeah, you're going to be mad. We're not saying an off switch. A control means being able to influence it and affect it. And you start by noticing what are the things that are making you feel better or worse, and then consider actively seeking those things out in order to help yourself feel better or worse. And then you can make a plan. So step one in all of this is getting people to be okay with not feeling good sometimes. Now, we've got a real problem with any negative feeling must be eradicated immediately. You know, and young person comes to you and they're like, oh, I'm really, really sad. And you're like, oh, come on, cheer up. It's like, why? Why are you insisting that they have to cheer up? You know, I love it. At some point, if someone's like, oh, why don't you cheer up? I'm trying to say, well, because my grandma just died. It'd be really creepy if I was giggling right now. You know, there are reasons for feeling bad sometimes. And by constantly rushing into fix when someone's feeling bad, we teach them that, no, you shouldn't be feeling this. Should is not a word that should attach to emotions at all. You know, you get percent, I know I shouldn't be upset. It's like, no, you're upset. Upset is upset. That's fine. It might be that you don't actually have a full grasp of the situation. And if you understand more of the situation, you might, with new information, feel less upset. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be feeling upset when your understanding of the situation is something upsetting. We want to recognize that this interest in come on, cheer up tells kids that there's an off switch somewhere. And you just got to find that button, push it, and then you won't feel the emotion anymore. Ain't nothing healthy out there that acts as an off switch. I mean, there are some very serious pharmaceuticals and substances, self-harm. Yeah, we don't want them to be turning to that. We want them to be using healthy strategies, which are not an off switch. And if they are focused on the off switch, you'd be like, well, why should I waste time taking deep breaths when I could just take that pill and feel better now? Well, because we'd like you to have a variety of options and less addiction in your life. So the most important is just making it okay to have the feelings in the first place. You say, yeah, it looks like you're feeling this, or yeah, I would be upset if that happened to me. You know, wow, yeah, if someone insulted me, I'd be upset too. I wonder if maybe that's not what that person meant to say. Rather than saying, oh, he wasn't insulting you. But first say, yeah, the emotions make sense. And then we want to give them a name. We got all kinds of things out there for how to name emotions. If you've ever, who's seen Inside Out? Yeah, if your wheel has the wrong colors, you gotta get a new wheel because we've decided what color the emotions are. The cat one comes in both pages and the dog one comes in both pages, but when I first made the cat one, I put it up on my door and everyone in the hall was like, oh, that's great. Don't like dogs, huh? So I had to go make another one for dogs. And yes, I am keeping track of which one gets requested more. I'm on team cat. Anyway, but you want them to be able to identify with what a feeling is. So one way to help is make it part of your routine that whenever you see a kid having any kind of behavior, you can go with adults as well, you name it for them. Say, wow, it looks like you're really disappointed. Oh, it looks like you're really excited about that. Wow, I think, you look proud. And if you get it wrong and they tell you, no, I'm angry, say, oh, okay. Right? They're using words. Words are really important. It's kind of funny, the signs that they have, when they start getting that many as that kid one, God, I hate being the kid that artist, if that artist has a son, I do feel sorry for him because everyone's going to assume. But anyway, when you get that many different faces going up there, you're kind of overwhelming what a kid who wants to point at a picture can grasp. That doesn't mean you give up on learning the vocabulary then, though. You just recognize that older kids can do words. And words are powerful. Words are wonderful. Words give you a sense of how to get a grasp on something. My oldest daughter came to us as a foster child when she was 15, and she was mad. Everything made her mad. Teacher made me mad. Bus driver made me mad. Oh, this homework, it makes me so mad. And we're word people in our family. Our house looks like it's made out of bookcases. So mostly just out of tedium. I turn to her and say, well, when you say you're mad, are you saying that you're frustrated or that you're feeling insulted? I was trying to teach me new words. It really makes me mad when you say that. So when you say you're mad at me now, she'd storm off to her room. But eventually she figured out that, frustrated feels different from insulted, feels different from disrespected, feels different from thwarted, all of those things feel different, and you do different things to take care of them. Like what's the difference between irritated and irritable? Irritated, that thing bothers me. Irritable, everything bothers me. You're going to do different things depending on which one you have. So getting kids to have as broad a definition, broader vocabulary of emotions really, really helps. Then we want them to understand different sizes of emotions, which again, I feel like I'm about to hear someone talk. I could be wrong, which again, lots of kids don't do automatically. If you've got a negative feeling, you frequently have the sense that it's on or off. You turn to someone with anxiety and say, hey, on a 10-point scale, what is it? They're like, well, what difference does it make? All a 2 is a 10 on the way. But you want them to be able to start to recognize different sizes. So you find a metaphor that works, whether it's, how hot you're running, or different colors or animals. The cat thing evolved because there was a girl who was 4 who could describe when she was more upset because she was, I'm a cat. Which meant she was going to start scratching and biting real soon if she didn't get her way. It's like, okay, so now you can turn to her and say, okay, what can we, be like, I'm going to be a lion soon. Say, okay, what can we do to keep you a kitten? How can we help you keep it small? So you find whatever metaphor works for them. We do love our 10-point scales, don't we? I don't know why. I kind of feel like making like a 7.3 point scale or something like that. But I know you can't see the details, but I made that animal one for anxiety. You've never had an anxiety scale that makes you go, oh, that's adorable. But it's a good one. But getting them to be able to understand that these emotions come in different sizes. And when they're relatively small, you can do more about them than if you wait until you're overwhelmed. Which again is getting back to the importance of validating the emotions. I love the floor zambonis. That is cool. But validating the emotions, because if you've got a kid who does not feel that it is safe, that there's no control, and if I'm getting in trouble for hitting that kid when I'm angry, the only answer is to never get angry. Yeah, that's not going to work. But a lot of people grow up with that. Again, my daughter, when I was trying to get her registered, and it was a bureaucratic nightmare, I turned to her and said, going in to talk to the registrar again. Do you want to come with? I know it's kind of tedious going to these meetings. She goes, yeah, I want to come with. You guys see that thing you do where you get mad, but you don't get mad. And it wasn't, she hadn't seen people be angry without it escalating. And that's something that we could definitely be pointing out to the kids when we're looking at like protests and people talk about peaceful protests and say, yes, you can have a peaceful protest where the people are pissed off and they are agitated and they are loud and they might even be rude. Nothing's getting broken. That is a peaceful protest because it's okay to be upset if there's something that upsetting. Separating out the action from the feeling. So we want them to be able to get the different sizes. One part of that is so that you can catch it early on. Notice when you're getting a little bit upset. Kids are not known for their insight. They might not really be able to notice it. And if you've got a whole classroom going, you might not notice it until it's already at the 8, 9, 10 stage also. That's when it's not cheating to figure out what their buttons are and gently touch them sometimes in order to consciously be able to point out. If you've got a kid where every time they play a game, if they lose, that board's flying, you find a time to sit down and play a game with the kid. And you beat him instead of letting him win to keep things quiet. But throughout the game, you say, hey, it looks like you're getting a little bit agitated. How about if you can take some deep breaths and otherwise help them recognize what the lower levels feel like. The other reason we want them to know the numbers is so they can know when they're going down. How many times, again, with the pain scale we have, a kid will come in. Are there any nurses? Any of you nurses? Okay, yes. We all know the kids come in, I've got a headache. And scale of 1 to 10, it's an 8. You have to keep them going, oh, that's so cute. Someday you'll know what an 8 feels like. But, you say, okay, it's an 8. I always ask, how long have you had it? And they'll be like 5 minutes. Like, it takes you 10 minutes to get to my office. How did you know to leave? That's bizarre. But anyway, you give them Tylenol. A little bit later, you see them. So how are you feeling? Terrible. Still have a headache. Oh, scale of 1 to 10 is 4. So it is better. No, I still have a headache. I didn't say, is it all better? I said, is it better? 4 is less than 8. That's an improvement. Do you want your 8 back? No, I don't think so. So let's be happy with the 4. So we want them to be able to recognize that reduced amount. Because I hate to tell you, we do not want 0 to be their goal. I mean, especially with anxiety. The harsh thing I'm saying with the problem with a lot of our anxiety meds is when they work. Because having something that can take the anxiety away, they learn no skills then. It's like saying, I'll teach you how to ride a bike. Step 1, take the bike away. No, you need to have low levels of unhappy emotions in order to learn what you can do about them that doesn't involve property damage. So distress tolerance is huge. We want people to learn. But yeah, I can be okay with the tube. I don't have to run to the nurse if I've got a tube. I don't have to take a medicine to make it go away. 2, I can live with. If 0 is their goal, they'll never be able to take a test. So to help them understand what they're feeling, we look at those physical symptoms that they may have been told all their life they should be ignoring. You say, no, pay more attention to them. Your stomach is telling you something. Let's find out what it's telling you. It might be telling you that you hate math. It might be telling you that you didn't eat breakfast. It might be telling you that you ate breakfast and you should not have dairy products anymore. It might be telling you that you're really worried about that other friend in your math class. We got to find out what it's telling you so that we can do something about it. We're going to focus the strategies on wherever you feel the physical symptoms. So if just in general, yeah, I know why I'm anxious. How do I make the anxiety itself go down, not away? Say, okay, well, where are you feeling it? And if we can do the opposite physically, then that will reduce the feeling some. We used to think that if you got scared, your heart rate goes up, right? No, your heart rate goes up and then you get scared. Bear walks in the room, first thing your heart rate goes up. Then your brain's like, oh, heart rate's up, we must be scared. They actually did a study for it. And the study, it did not involve bringing a bear into the room, which is a shame, because that would have been cool. But what they did was they had them on computers looking at scary pictures. And half of them, they gave propranolol, which is a high blood pressure med that keeps your blood pressure stable so it doesn't get so reactive. And the others didn't. And then they compared the scores, and the people who didn't have the propranolol found all those pictures scarier than the people who were taking the propranolol. So you focus on the physical symptoms. If you get really tense, you stretch those muscles in order to reduce the tension. What do especially teenage boys do when they are mad? Punch walls, right? You really don't, unless you own a drywall business, you don't want to have a teenage boy in your house. And it makes sense because when you're angry, you feel it in your shoulder muscles. And part of your brain is going, okay, if we could just loosen up those muscles, we would not be feeling so much rage. So do something, and that will loosen it up. Something else that will loosen it up is throwing something. So you can say, hey, instead of punching the wall, take this and throw it as hard as you can. Ooh, that's soft. It didn't do it. Give me a mouse. Give me a mouse. Where's the mice? I used to have better splat balls. Buy a splat ball. They're very cool. They flatten and they stick. Maybe it's the wakeboard. I won't keep chasing that, but they stick. Yeah, that'll go well. And then you tell the kid, oh, if you throw it harder, it'll stick longer. That may not even be true. I don't know. Obviously, I can't even get it to stick at all. But it gives them something to focus on other than what they're angry at and vent that physical. So you also want to notice what are the cognitive things that happen when you are having a lot of stress or a lot of problems. What sort of cognitive distortions do you develop? What negative thoughts? Who sometime in the last week has thought to yourself, I'm such an idiot? And who is lying right now? Everybody. But when you say to yourself for the fourth time in one day, I'm such an idiot, some part of you is like, I'm having a really crap day, aren't I? You get that when you're stressed out, you're going to feel that more. And so negative thoughts. Another thing that happens when you're upset is tunnel vision. You cannot take in more than what you are focused on, whether it's that you're mad or scared or whatever. Some people might notice that movements that happen or their impulse control. Pretty much everyone, when you're under stress, your impulse control goes way down. We all have those days where it's like, okay, I probably should not go shopping on the way home today because today was one of those days. Or I should totally go shopping on the way home because I'm going to finally get that thing that I've been able to say no to all of them. So these are universal things. So we also want the kids to start getting some insight and sharing with us, what can other people see? This is a great chance to talk to them about the fact that we are not psychic. Okay. Some people are really obvious. My family, I've got another daughter actually genetically connected to me, and we are pink people. When she had a very dramatic asthma attack and she was, in the ICU, and the doctor's like, I think it might be allergies. And so I'm thinking of giving her an EpiPen. I'm like, anything that might save her life, but why do you think allergies? And he said, well, because she's so red. I'm like, seriously, dude? Look at us. I turn red if I think hard. Okay, so yeah, if you want to know if I'm agitated, yeah, you'd see that. Some kids, you'll see them clenching, faces in it. Other kids do that, the rabbit thing. They get the foot going. So there might be physical things like that we see. We might see behavior things, and we need to know because they're very different. Some kids, they get upset, they isolate, they disappear. Other kids, they are in the middle of everything. They'll be very intrusive. They'll answer every question. Some get quiet, some get loud. Some get really pissy, some get really funny. Told my therapist at one point, if I start making more jokes, it's a good time to ask me what I'm not saying, because when I get more stressed, I start making more jokes. So finding out what sort of behavior there is. Because again, we want to find that behavior when it's relatively small because we see how it escalates. You know, they might just shut down, which is not good, but it's sure better than the other ones where they just start not doing anything that they're told. They might start getting insulting, yelling, they might start doing property damage, and it can escalate up to, you know, hitting, breaking things, self-harm, and so on. So we want to catch these things before they snowball. So one thing is to recognize what's going on outside the kid that is influencing how they are feeling. So we've got the predisposing factors, things that set a person up to be having a hard time. It can be time of year, time of day, anniversary of a horrible thing. Does everyone feel just totally chill and mellow during MCAS season, or is that the time of year that's a little bit higher stress? You know, things like that. There's the morning people. Who are morning people? The rest of us hate you, just so you know. There might be certain classes or certain activities. You know, oh yeah, if it's going to be a group activity, that kid's going to be having a rougher time. And I want to step back and point out that a rougher time for the kid is generally, I mean, it might be that they are feeling bad. It might be that they've just got too much energy, you know, that it's just a bad fit for what's trying to get done. We're talking about being able to adjust emotions, cranking them up and cranking them down. We all know there are some kids where they're just too happy for their own good some days, and we need them to be able to scale that back as well. So there can be relationship things setting them up for it. What's good, and we might not know, might be stuff going on at home, or it might be stuff going on that we can see. The situation being really crowded, a loud environment is frequently very agitating. You know, lots of kids have a lot more trouble in the lunchroom than anywhere else. I gotta say, your typical lunchroom is cruel in so many ways. It's like, wow. And then we also want to pay attention to physical factors. You know, are they hungry? Are they thirsty? You know, are you getting a little bit hangry? You know, are you cold? Are you hot? Did they miss a med? Now, want to point out that if they miss, all of these things are not, oh, well, you know, because of this bad thing's going to happen. There's nothing anyone can do about it. No, it just means that because of this, it's going to be harder for the kid to be managing. And we should be aware of that and be ready for it. Not saying, oh, he didn't take his Ritalin today, so he's just going to be impulsive and be hitting people, and there's nothing we can do about it. You really don't want to go there, because I've got some in my family where he's like, oh yeah, I had that hard time, but I didn't take my med that day. I'm like, that's not the end of this conversation. That's the beginning. It's like, no, you're still responsible for your actions. How can you prepare? Okay, I missed my med today. What am I going to have to do to compensate for the fact that I don't have it? It might be, oh, I should remember to go take the afternoon dose. You know, same as I'm really hungry and that's making me irritable. What am I going to do? Well, I might eat something. If I can't eat something, I'm going to realize that I'm irritable and take that into account in my interactions and try to, you know, put more effort into managing them. We also want to notice that once something starts happening, the external environment interacts with the emotions for good or for ill. And again, these can be very opposite and very individual. You know, you give someone space. Oh, you're upset. I'll give you space. Some people feel like, good, I need privacy. Other people feel like, I'm abandoned now. No one cares. You know, or, oh, let me be supportive of you. You look upset. And some kids will be like, everybody's looking at me now. I'm totally humiliated. Other kids will be like, oh, yeah, they notice, they care. So we need to find out. We also want to notice what people around the kid effect it has. You know, who do they represent to that kid? You really want to know these things. You know, if you've got a kid who's had his parents or her parents taken out of their house in the middle of the night by the cops, you probably want to know that before you have Officer Friendly come to teach them about bikes. You know, so you want to know what people around them make it better or worse. That does not automatically, you know, if authority figures stress them out so that if they're having a hard time, the principal coming along makes them even more stressed out. That does not mean that you ban the principal from the building, but you know that that's what's going on. You know, there might be in the high school level, there's lots of kids who are like, oh, I need my friend here when I'm upset. So whenever I need to go to the nurse, my friend needs to come too because she's the only one who can calm me down. Like, okay, no, but now I understand that's going to be more work for you to calm down without her. So knowing it, not necessarily having that dictate how things are. A couple things that are fairly universal. One is feeling belittled, dismissed, ridiculed. You're like, yes, that's why we never do it. We always do it. Okay, we got to recognize that, you know, a kid will be really upset about something. You know, oh, why is it so loud in there? Oh, it's just Johnny. Oh, just in there. It's just very dismissive, you know. Oh, yeah, having a rough day? Yeah. Sarah's upset again. Again, you slip in there, you know, or come on, it's just a little toy. Don't be so upset. You know, teaching kids, there's a should to attach to their emotions. It's very, very much feeds into that. Also, feeling trapped, crowded, in a loud, you know, too much noise can also be agitating. Now, in all likelihood, the kid is trapped because you can't let them take their show on the road. And the only reason it's so loud in there is because they are in there being loud. Again, it's just so that we know that that's going to be making a hard situation harder. So now we want them to start thinking about what actions can I take to affect what's going on in my body. So you listen to your body. Start off, does it need something? Does it need to move in some way? Which a lot of kids really need to be able to move more. You know, they might need to get up and move their whole body sometimes. You gotta recognize it. For a lot of kids, sitting in a classroom is, remember planes? Remember going on plane rides? You ever been on one of those really great ones that's like coast to coast or across an ocean? So it's like 6 hours long and you've got the best seat. It's like all the way in the back and it's in the middle and there's two people you don't know. They're really big sitting on both sides of you and they're kind of asleep and leaning in. And you got to pee. And you're trying to figure out how much discomfort is enough to deal with the fact that that's what just sitting in the classroom can be for a lot of kids. How much fidgetiness. So this is where a lot of these fidget things are really useful because while it might be really useful to get up and move the whole body, it might be really useful to, you know, hey, that kid's a little agitated. How about I have that kid take the attendance down or whatever. One little round trip, they come back and they're able to focus more. For a lot of people, just fidgeting while sitting can help them blow off that steam, help them listen better. Having something to play with in their hands can help them feel more settled. And so if you got someone who's doodling, let them doodle. They want to be fidgeting with a toy, figure out if it's helping them listen more, then let them do it. If it's distracting them more, then talk to them, say, you know, what about this was distracting? How can we help you keep feeling better without it being to the extent that it distracts other people? So remember these things? It don't work. Not just because this one's broken, but they never worked. I mean, that's one of the problems is that people will attach the word fidget to anything. One of the links at the end is to Jessica McCabe doing a review of fidget toys. And she's sitting there with the fidget spinner and she goes, it's moving and I'm not. This is not what I want. It's not what you need. You need to have things that you can be moving. Like, where's the little box? There's a little square thing. There it is, that one. Where you can do lots of little things like that. The putties are wonderful. Anyone ever get the crazy Aaron's thinking putty? These are great. And the thing is, you'll get a sense when I've got in my bag a thing that's got like 5 different ones because each one's a slightly different texture. And it'll be, what do I need right now? What texture do I need? What movement do I need to be able to feel calmer, more settled, more focused, more present? So if you've got a kid where they are fidgeting with something and it's distracting, you have that problem? Okay. Start with an example. If you got a kid where you get one of those yoga balls to sit on, okay? The kid's sitting there bouncing. And now he's listening. Meanwhile, a kid next to him is like, teacher, make him stop, he's distracting me. If your automatic reaction is, I knew that ball was going to be a problem. You want to take a step back and recognize that you've just officially decided that the second kid's attention matters more to you than the first kid's. And you go up to the kid and say, okay, well, here's the deal. When Johnny's bouncing, he can listen better. But when Jane's bouncing, it's harder for Bobby to listen. It's entirely possible that once Bobby knows that Johnny listens better, it might not distract him anymore. Context is amazing. When I had an office, it was attached to the adolescent unit, and I'm going to do copies. And there was a kid on there that would make this horrible, sort of a screech noise sporadically. Like just when it's been long enough since the last one that you think it's not going to happen again, that's when it would happen again. It was like the flawless timing of the adolescent that really wants to just maximally piss people off. And it's just setting my teeth on edge. And I'm making copies and a staff person's passing by and it screech happens. I'm like, what is that sound? Just looking to bond over it. He's like, oh, you mean the new girl with Tourette's? I'm like, oh, it's a tick. And then next time I heard the screech, it didn't bother me at all. Once I had a context for it. But if the bouncing is really bothering them, then you turn and say, okay, we've got a problem, because if bouncing's happening, Bobby can't focus, and if bouncing is not happening, Johnny can't focus. What can we as a community do about this? And most likely, the two kids look at you like you're a little bit simple and say, could we maybe not sit right next to each other? And go, yes, good problem solving. So if you got a kid where he's like destroying, like taking a pen and making just a pile of little pen parts by the end of class. We gotta do something with that kid. He's destroying pens. First question, whose pen? If it's his own. Second question, who cleans up the mess? If he does, I don't see a problem there. He can supply his own pens, and that's fine. If picking things apart makes the person feel better. Now, I had a nurse who called saying that a lot of the girls were starting to pick at their fingertips, and the skin was getting really raw on their fingertips. And how do I get them to stop that? Like, well, if that's what they need to be doing right now, you want them to do it without damaging their skin. So get them some Elmer's glue. She's like, what? I'm like, didn't you ever do that? You put Elmer's glue, you rub it all over your hands, and then you can just peel it off to your heart's content, and then you put more on. Or you get bottle caps and pick the plastic out of the bottle caps. You find what works for you, and you do it in a non-destructive way. If someone's making a noise that's bothering people, you're going to say, hey, is there any way you could do the same sort of thing in a way that's not so noisy? The problem is not the fidgeting, the problem is the noise. So you also look and say, is your body like needing food? Does it need water? Do you have a headache? Would you maybe consider taking a Tylenol? Who else has like spent all afternoon being irritated that your headache is still there, and then it suddenly dawns on you, there's something I could do about this. And then you look at the physical symptoms and do the opposite of wherever your physical symptoms are. So if you feel cold, you do something to get warm. If you feel warm, you do something to feel cold. And we do this automatically. When you're really upset, you're hot and flushed and on the verge of tears about something, you go and you get a cold face cloth. You wipe your face down. And you feel less hot, less flushed, less on the verge of tears. It's not the magic cloth that erases all grief, but it does bring it down a few notches to where you can get a grip on it. If your muscles are tight, which they almost always are when you're in distress, stretch them, figure out what the muscles are and move them. That's where, getting up and walking around a little might be helpful. If the person feels really scattered, something that contains them. I'm really sad I didn't bring all my stuff. I'm out of practice bringing stuff. Because then I'd ask, who else to pretend they're scattered? Because I have a weighted blanket. Put the weighted blanket on. Now, mind you, there's a thing at the end about how to make a weighted blanket, and it points out that it should not exceed 10% of the person's body weight. I didn't know that when I made this one, so I've got a weighted. If you know anyone who's like 300 pounds and anxious, I got the blanket for them. But even just having like a stuffed animal, a weighted stuffed animal, which I also have directions for how to make. I had one on my desk back when I had an office, and whenever the kids in the partial program were having like a really rough meeting, that rabbit would take off and leave, would go, and just having it sitting on their lap during the meeting. Anyone who's team cat? You know what it's like when your cat's sitting on your lap and the world is not so bad. Yeah, that's our feeling. If a person is breathing fast, and you often are when they're agitated, conscious, slow, deep breathing. Again, this is fooling your brain. Your brain's like, ooh, when I'm upset, I breathe shallow and fast, but I'm breathing slow and deep. Maybe I'm not as anxious as I thought I was. And stuff, you know stuff, right? You don't need to define stuff. The stuff, you want to distract the kid. You want to, find something that just takes them out of their immediate headspace. Like I said, I got to buy things. I really wanted to buy this thing. I'm like, but how on earth do I pass it off as a therapeutic tool? And then I realized, if you got a kid who's really, really stuck and they just won't let go of whatever's bothering them, I think that would therapeutically distract them. Justified expense, yes. But it might be. I recall once where there was a girl who had anxiety and Tourette's, and her tick was that she blinked. And when she was really stressed out, she would blink so much that she was excoriating her cornea. She was getting lacerations on her eye from her eyelids. And so at one point, when she was doing this lot, she goes to the nurse, and the nurse brilliantly looks and says, I wonder if it's something you ate. What'd you have for breakfast? No, that wouldn't do it. What about dinner yesterday? No, how about lunch yesterday? Yesterday's breakfast? And by the time they'd gone through like 3 days of meal recall, she wasn't blinking as much anymore. And then I said, okay, gotta let you know, I never cared at all what you were eating. I was just distracting you. And that seemed to help. So what could you do in the classroom like that? And the girl loved Sudoku. So they just made sure she always had a book of Sudoku with. And whenever she started feeling it revving up, she'd open it up and do a Sudoku. If someone else knows she was blinking a lot, they just tap the book and she'd stop, do a Sudoku, distract herself and do it. That's where you want it to be a temporary thing, but a different soothing activity. This is where the link models come in. It's just like, yeah, I'm just gonna look at this for a while. Or the way you make it a time thing is you shake it up like this, and then you watch the oil separate out. And it'll take about a minute or two. You say, yeah, whatever you're worried about, just think about the oil right now. And then by the time the oil is separated, check back in with yourself and see if your problem is not as overwhelming as it was. Breathing, we all talk about breathing being good. This is a copy of something from an app that I found. This is the best breathing guide I've ever seen. If you're like looking at that on your phone, it is like impossible to not breathe in time with it. There's ones where like have a counter going around. I was like, yeah, that doesn't. My daughter has one that's changing shapes, and that one she likes. But to me, this is just forces you to breathe in time to it. Well, not forces, because that sounds negative. But so you want to collect a sensory toolkit. Have it on hand. And by you, I mean maybe the classroom, maybe the nurse, maybe the kid. Have your own kid. Everyone make their own. And you want to focus on all the senses. So sense of smell, people, how do we do sense of smell? Sense of smell is kind of hard. Well, there's lots of things that people make with smells in them. There's candles. Like we've got this candle here. Now, I understand you're not supposed to set fire to things in schools, but say you don't have to burn them. My daughter, the asthma one, not the mad one, when she was going to college, she was working in Bath and Body Works, and I heard so much about her job and virtually nothing about her classes, but that's okay. And she told me that if they want to sell someone a candle, they just rub it, and then you can smell it on you, and you can, kind of, and now keep the smell with me. So there are ways to do the smell. You can always get, lotions like that one. I got that one at like Joann's. It's cheap. By cheap, I mean it will do nothing to moisturize your hands, but it does smell like lavender. You can also just have like aromatics. Have a cotton ball with some essential oils on it. Do not put essential oils directly on the skin unless it's been diluted in a carrier oil, because A, might burn the skin, and B, those suckers are expensive. Why would you do that? But also you might have, like having a little thing to sniff. They've got the little aerosolized things now, or just a little thing of coffee or something like that can help change how you feel. Taste also, having something that's very sweet or very sour. I know you guys were like looking askance at this baggie here. Ginger and peppermint are very good for stomach aches. So if you've got someone who has really bad anxiety stomach aches, having ginger or peppermint things, peppermint tea, really good. Has anyone ever seen those ginger chews? Those are brilliant. I mean, they are so gingery, they're like hot and so chewy that you cannot do anything else for like 10 minutes. If you've got a really anxious kid that just will not shut up about their anxiety, you just pop one in and you got about 10 minutes of silence. The whole class. The whole class. Ginger ale also settles the stomach, but of course you don't want to be like the soda fountain for the school. So if you make it flat, then it's less interesting, but just as gingery. And if that's still not quite, if you have a microwave and you make it lukewarm, it is golden for a stomach and wildly unappealing for anything else. So they're not going to be coming to you for candy all the time. So, but you can also tell them, at home, what sort of things you can do. Same thing comes up with sound. With sound like that. You ask kids, what would you do at home to calm down? What can you listen to? You'd be like, well, listen to my music. Say, okay. Later. And be okay, your music can be helpful, but you can't do that everywhere. So what else could you possibly do? Sound might not be something that the kid can choose when they're in school. We can set it up though. You can have a white noise machine or music, quiet music, nature sounds. I don't really get the nature sounds though. I mean, if you're in the, am I right? If you've got the nature sounds of the babbling brook in your nurse's office, that really only works if you also have a bathroom. Because that just does not go well. When I was my first nursing job, I was a camp nurse. I discovered the best thing was to have a radio that had two stations. One was just kind of, benign music, and the other station was NPR for when you want to make them leave already. That they'd sit there and they'd soothe and chill out, and then you turn on, if it's BBC hour news in a British accent, they'll be told they are out of here and leave. So then for sight, having soothing pictures, having coloring books like those. Coloring books are like such a trendy thing now. And again, you'll get someone who's like, but they're not paying attention. They're distracted by that. They might be, they might not. We need people to recognize that people can pay attention without looking straight at you. Like I say, if I was universalizing my brain on all of you, I'd say that none of you are listening to a word I say, because not one of you is knitting. I want to really focus. If I'm looking at someone, my brain's all over the map. But if I'm listening and doing something like knitting, then I can really listen. So they might be really listening for the first time ever as they look engrossed in their book. So you want to have it be an open conversation with the kid where the kid feels safe saying, yeah, I did kind of stop listening about halfway through. Say, okay, what do you think tripped you up? If it was starting off focusing and then it got harder, was it when you were changing colors and suddenly got so caught up in choosing the next color? That's the case. Keep the coloring book. Bring just one pencil. Don't need to be making art. Color everything in the same color. Or if it's the shapes, the shapes were really starting to suck you in. Okay, bring all the pencils and just bring like graph paper. Color in squares on graph paper. Find something like that. There's one school where one of the girls wanted to do knitting, and they're like, yeah, but now she's like coming up and asking for help with the pattern and not the homework anymore. We don't think she's listening at all. I said, okay, you don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You turn to her and say, okay, if you're going to be a proper knitter, you're always going to have like 5 projects going at once. So that one with the pattern, that's for other times. In class, you've got just back and forth, back and forth. Something simple that'll help you focus in class. The wave bottles is to look at. You can also do distraction with looking. Like if you say, okay, everybody look around the room and notice everything that is orange. And as you look around and you start, after a while, the orange things start kind of popping to you. Then after a little bit of that, you say, okay, now make green pop instead. Or it could be looking for shapes. And it's a way to just center yourself, ground yourself in your senses. Tactile, like I said, weighted items, different sensations. That's what those little tiny balls that look like little pin cushions. You roll it on your arm and stuff. Can be very, tactile things, fidgety things, so on. Temperature changes. One of the things we always love to have is have an orange in the freezer. Frozen orange is just that. You scratch it, you can smell the citrus, you can roll it, you can feel it. Doesn't make much noise unless you drop it. You don't want to give it to anyone who wants to be throwing something at the wall. You got to separate out these things. And touchstones would be any object. I heard about this from a nurse who would have, you got the kids who are just coming constantly, every 5 minutes, all day long. And really, they're just kind of coming to touch base. She had on her desk a bowl of stones. And when she started seeing a veterinary kid, she'd say, hey, you should take one of these stones and come see me at 1 o'clock and bring it back. And thus, now hopefully the kid won't be coming multiple times before 1 o'clock. Another thing is, he'll have the stone in his pocket. And every time he's reaching in and feeling the stone, reminds them of 1 o'clock, I'm going to go touch base and feel better. If you have a kid who's upset, what will you do at home? I'd be petting my cat. Okay, why don't you bring some fake fur? Don't bring a piece of the cat in. But bring something reminiscent of the cat that you can touch. And it just reminds you that, when I get home, I'm going to be able to do this. It's not as good as touching the real cat. Well, if you think about it, if you stop right now and go, okay, everyone imagine eating some of your favorite ice cream. You can kind of get a little echo of that. Not as good as the real thing, but it's still there. And that's what you want to learn how to do. You want to be able to imagine in a tangible way what it feels like to feel better. That's what self-regulation is all about. Being able to create in your mind and thus in your senses that state of being soothed. And a great way to do it is remember what it felt like being soothed and imagine it in the future. And have something tangible that you touch to remind you of that and tie you to it. You also want to remember that among the behaviors you want to be modifying to deal with these are your thoughts, because thoughts are behavior too, okay? So recognize when you're having negative thoughts, recognize when you're having, what they call them, cognitive distortions or automatic negative thoughts or anything like that. On the black and white one, you can tell people recognize it by any time your automatic thought or statement is an global. Everybody hates me. Nobody wants to be my friend. I'll never be able to do math. Anything that is 100% always. And say, okay, that's a sign that your brain is trying to trick you into feeling bad. So recognizing that. Other ones that we have are things like mind reading. They want me to be upset. Or they knew I was sad and then they did this terrible thing. Recognizing that sort of thing. And you'll see that like, well, it's not worth telling that person because they're going to not care about what I say. So mind reading, projecting into the future. Emotional reasoning is a huge one. I have this emotion and therefore based on the emotion, I know the reality. I feel scared, therefore you are threatening me. Rather than whatever's going on, I feel scared, separate from what's going on outside. There's lots and lots of cognitive distortions. Any of those will give you, like the C21 gives you 2 pages of that, but there's lots of other summaries of them that you can request. So changing activity can help change your mood, as we all know. So with movement, target muscles feeling, throwing, running. Anyone know a kid where if they just could get up and go run up and down the hall for 5 minutes, they'd be able to come back better? Anyone have a school where you can let a kid go out and run up and down the hall for 5 minutes? I was at a private school. They're like, oh yeah, fine. I'm like, oh, my work here is done. Great. They're also the ones that gave me the that one, that wave bottle with the rheostatic fluid in it. It's very cool. Anyway, if you've got a kid that really needs that kind of blow off of energy and they can't, there's no place that they can do it. You know how in a gym you can do multiple repetitions at a lower weight or fewer repetitions at a higher weight? Same thing applies here. So if you add weight to the kid who is walking, that will burn the energy same as running. So you might have a kid where you notice they're getting kind of stressed out and you say, okay, hey, can you take this box of books down to the nurse? or anyone else that's in on it. And they carry the last ones down and our spoon goes, oh yes, this is the one I need. You can take the rest back now. One round trip with a box of books and the kid might be good to go for a couple more hours. Focus or distraction, like I said, with puzzles, wave bottles, so on. I'm doing a nice, we're gonna look at this for this limited amount of time. The breathing exercises we know work. Again, you can fool your brain into thinking that you are calmer than you are, but kids will always say that they don't work. So you give them some other reason to be doing the breathing. I mean, if they really are trying to do it, have them blow in their hands, then they have more of a tangible understanding of it. But you could also get bubbles and say, get better bubbles than I did. You get bubbles and you say, if you blow really slow and steady, it'll make a bigger bubble. Don't do it with these because that's just cruel because there's no way that works on this one. and see if that can help. Or pinwheels, blowing on a pinwheel. How long can you get to go for? You get them to slow down their breathing. There's various exercises of, following it different shapes. The square breathing, in, hold for 4, out for 4. Triangle, basically the same thing without one of the pauses. Pick a shape, it doesn't matter. Breathe around any shape you like. The point of it is you're slowing the breathing down and you're making them think about the shape and the counting and keep track of that and where are they in the site, distract them from wherever they were. And you're someone who was a real math whiz, and so I had him doing this very complicated where each breath is one longer than the other until he gets to a prime number, and it just gave him enough math things that it distracted him. Now, another thing you can do to adjust your emotions is what we call opposite action. You recognize the larger urges to do things that you probably shouldn't do, and try to do the opposite of it. So when you're sad, the tendency is that you want to just kind of curl into a ball and stay away from everyone. I'm not fit to be around other people kind of feeling. So the opposite action is get active, physically and or socially. Get up and get moving. Get up and go do something. Go be around people. You got to pick the right people or train them. Because, you'll have kids, there's lots of teenagers where they are off in their room self-injuring. It's like, well, did you know that you were feeling? Yeah, well, could you go and ask your parent, because you only do that when you're alone. So if you were around other people, you wouldn't do it, right? Yeah. So could you go out and tell your parents that you just kind of want to not be alone right now? No, because they would give me the 3rd degree. What's wrong? Do we need to cause it? So what you need to be able to have someone where you can walk in and say, hi, I just really want to be in here and I do not want to have a conversation. So can we just parallel play and you stay on your computer and I'm going to stay online? Or it might be, hi, can I come in and tell you what's going on for my day and do not try to solve any of the problems, just listen. Or, hey, could you tell me about your day? Because I'm just so sick of thinking about mine. Can I come in and just listen? Where you tell people what it is you need them to do. And have them willing to do that instead of first they need to grill you about what's your mental state that you need that. Now with anger, the tendency with anger is that you want to attack whatever you're angry at. And this one we're automatic. Take space, back off, separate out, move away from what you're trying to attack. But you can also, you have the urge to be doing harm. So another opposite action is to do something nice. So if you're ever someone who is babysitting half of a fight, they're like, hey, can you just keep this kid in your office while we go sort out the other kid and then we'll come back? While you got them, ask them to do something for you that's simple. Not overly taxing, but like, hey, can you help me put ice cubes in bags for ice bags? Or can you help me alphabetize these things? Something that is totally within their realm and that you can thank them for after. It's almost with keeping like a bunch of cards with random names on it that you can shuffle periodically and say, hey, I need these alphabetized. Can you just help me out with that? So that they are doing something for someone. A really high level of that is doing something nice for the person you're mad at. That was like right next to passive aggressive though, so you want to be careful. But it kind of makes sense. If you're like really pissed at your spouse, doing something nice for them can help you remember that you love them, whether you want to or not. So now with guilt or shame, what we do is we hide it. don't tell anyone and keep it with you forever. Carry it with you always. So the opposite action for that is to fess up. Openly acknowledge, I did this. I'm sorry I did this. I'm doing these steps to make sure I don't do it again. And then you put it down and you walk away and you do not continue to harp on it forever. Oddly enough, while people are like, oh, I can't possibly tell anyone. It's like, yeah, telling people is the easier of those. It's the leaving it behind that gets really hard. And then with fear or anxiety, of course, the goal is to avoid. That just makes sense. Anxiety hurts, so you move away from pain. I mean, if the stove is hot, you pull your hand away. That makes sense. But if the spiders are scary and I run away from them all the time, pretty soon I can't be around any bugs at all. And so there's a problem there. So what you want to do is try to not run away. Try to actually do the scary thing. Or at least run away slower. Step one is don't outsource. Don't have everybody else taking care of the thing for you. You know, if you have to deal with your own triggers, it starts to be a big hassle and makes it a little bit more something you're invested in putting in the work to get better about it. You know, you need to have an incentive because it is painful and hard to overcome anxiety. It's got to be worth it on some level. And like I said, I had a phobia of spiders. And it was no problem because, you know, if you scream at spiders once or twice, after a while, you never see another spider because everyone around you will proactively keep you from ever coming in contact with the spider. Yeah, it's fine. I had no problem with that at all. What got me over it was I was a camp nurse and I was like also the critter person. I mean, not officially, but they knew I could. And they had caught some serpents. The difference between a snake and a serpent is that a serpent is pissed. And they found it in the lake and it was in a tank. And now if you came within a few feet of the tank, it was striking the glass trying to kill you. It's up in the nature section and parents visiting day is coming and they realized there is no good conversation to have about these snakes. Where did you find them? The lake my child swims in. And so they're like, how do we get rid of them though? Because you can't even get near the glass. I'm like, I got this, no problem. And so I get, you know, a cloth wrap stick, I get a jar, I've got everything I need to be able to manhandle them, and then we'll take them someplace that does not feed into the same lake and release them. And everyone's gathered around to watch it. Because I'm going and I go and I reach for the tank and I jumped and I squealed. There's a spider. All my macho cred just evaporated. And I'm like, but, and they're like, yeah, but you screamed at a spider, and it was only like that. I mean, I could have juggled the damn snakes, and I couldn't get any further. I'm like, okay, I need to do something about this spider phobia because it's embarrassing. So, but you find some incentive to do the scary thing, or run away slower, delay giving into it. That is an accomplishment that you can build on. Once you've got an idea of what things will work for you, make a list. Okay. It should be a list with many, many things on it. Now, because you're like, oh no, I'm fine. Whenever I'm upset, I just listen to my music. I'm like, yeah, you can't do that during your math test, okay? You need to have many things in case you don't have access to it. Or in case it doesn't work, because sometimes they don't. Okay? 50 ways. I recommend making cards. You know, I love the poster 50 ways to take a break. But if you thought of a 51st way, where would you put it? You know, after a while, it becomes very messy. And if you've got a written list, and you say to the kid, okay, what do you feel like would help you right now? And they look at the list and like, well, no, maybe, no, yes, no, maybe, no, yes, no, nothing. Because all those yeses get totally buried. Whereas the cards, you can kind of sort them. You can be like, okay, now I'm just looking at the yeses. Or I'm sorting them. These are the things I can do at home. These are the things I can do at school. I can do these in this class. I can do these in that class. It also quantifies it. You can say, okay, before leaving class, do 3 cards. And then when you get where you're going, you know, if you still need to leave class after that, you then are telling the person that you're going to go, you know, chill out with what you did on those cards. Now, of course, once you start giving them lists of coping strategies, or they start developing lists of coping strategies, they immediately start saying, it didn't work. Doesn't work. Well, I said, I've tried all the coping strategies and none of them work. Coping strategy is literally any action a human being can take. It could be climbing a mountain, it could be petting a cat. No, not that cat, this cat. Have you pet all the cats? It is impossible to have tried all of them. But you start with, okay, what did you expect it to do? Define work. Because again, they grew up in this world of where's the off switch? I'm still upset. Like, okay, how upset were you before? How upset are you now? Would you like me to bring the before you in to argue with you about whether you have improved? Improvement is something. If you had an anxiety that was an 8 and now it's a 5, that's good. You can build on that. Maybe you should keep doing this longer because after all, work can also take time. Sometimes it's not only it needs to be an off switch, but it needs to be a really fast one too. You're like, okay, you've been doing deep breathing for about 10 seconds. You might want to do it a little bit longer first. So you're going to define work. There's also a chance that it doesn't work because it doesn't work. That's okay. Go find something that does. I will give you samples. And then if you don't like any of them, go get your own. It's kind of like when you got a teenager who, it's like when you're hungry and you go and you open the fridge and you're like, what am I in the mood for? No. Yes, that's what will satisfy this hunger I have. Same sort of thing. I've got an emotional hunger. What will satisfy my emotional hunger? No, not that, not that, not that. After a while, when you got a teenager saying, there's nothing in the fridge, when you know that there's a lot, you're like, okay, go buy your own groceries then. Don't like what I have? Get some of your own. And I will help support you in exploring whether or not they work. But if you don't have anything that works, that means you need to keep looking. Not that you get to reward yourself by staying anxious forever. I'm not quite sure what the incentive is in there. So once they've got a list, they got maybe a deck of cards, now you can start making a plan. Prepare for challenges. When do you anticipate needing these? Try not to set yourself up for failure by having too many things at the same time. If you know that on my challenges list are, talking to this teacher and being hungry, don't set up the meeting for just before lunch. Maybe just after lunch is better. Don't give yourself compound challenges. It's okay to say, I'm gonna put that one on a day that I have more time for it. You also want to decide, okay, there's gonna be times that I feel bad. I do not need to bolt at the first sign of trouble. How much distress am I gonna just deal with? And not just like ignore, but do stuff to help it because it's small enough, but I don't need to leave class to do that stuff. Maybe even be doing some stuff so that it doesn't even start. So what are the in the moment things? And now, if my anxiety gets past that point, or my anger, or my whatever, if I've got an emotion that is past that point, now what am I going to do? And how is it a round trip? If it's school. I mean, if it's like, I can't stand that friend anymore, yeah, you could stop permanently. But if it's, I'm really struggling with math, you do need to figure out how to go back in. So you want to potentially leave the situation, that often helps, to go and do a specific coping strategy and then go back. Have it be a round trip. The goal is to go back when you are still a little bit bothered. Do not have 0 be the goal. And if possible, you have either built-in check-in or a round trip. I have one girl who had an anxiety disorder, and her plan was that when she got really stressed out, she could go to the bathroom and come back when she feels better. Well, when she's 20, I mean, and then they got really irritable when she'd be gone for like half an hour. I'm like, well, you told her not to come back till she feels better, and she hasn't felt better in years. So, but it might be that, okay, go get a drink and come back. Or if distraction needs to be part of it, it might be go get a drink and tell me how many steps it took to get there. Or go read that poster and tell me what date that event is next week. Something like that, where it's a round trip with something to occupy their mind. Some people have a parachute pass. Have you ever heard that phrase? This is for a kid who really needs to be able to leave a class and needs to be able to just get up and leave. And so they've got, a get out of class free card. And it can be really useful when you got a kid with a temper, like they had a death in the family and they just sometimes need to be able to just go. There was one school called where the girl had an ongoing anxiety disorder, but she wouldn't say anything until she was crying. And the teacher knows that, yeah, and she could just go for 5-10 minutes, come back and be fine. But by the time we knew she needed to go, she's sitting there with tears pooling on the desk. And by the time she knows she needs to go, she might not actively be crying, but making words is just not something her throat's going to be able to do then. And so she'd be a great one for a parachute pass. And if you don't want to have it be known, I thought, well, how about you have some task that needs to go to the office every day? You got the envelope there, and it's her job. At whatever point during the day, she needs to go for a walk. She'll just get up, pick up the envelope, and go. And that way the teacher knows that she needs to take her little break, and she's going to drop that off and come back. If you are having a parachute pass like that, you want to build in limits on its use that are age appropriate. You know, if you got a little kid, it might be you can use this just 3 times a day. You know, with an older kid, it might be you can use it a couple times a week. The reason why you want the limits is not to make them feel trapped, but you want the kid who's like, oh, got to get out of this class. I've only got one more use. I hate the next teacher more. Maybe I'll get through this class and save this for next time. That's what you want, because they are ranking different levels of their distress. They're showing that insight. They're sitting with their distress, having distress tolerance, and that's what we want them to do. So whatever they are doing, find something to praise. You know, whether it's, hey, you tried a new thing. You know, they come in, none of these worked. Oh, that's so good that you tried them. Hey, let's think of some new ones. You know, or yes, you left class after 10 minutes, but yesterday you left after 5. Yay, you made 5 more minutes. You know, find something to praise, because you got to recognize this is really hard work. And if the only credit they're ever going to get is when they're all perfect, and then the only praise they get is that people will ignore them and pretend that they were normal the whole time, that's not a lot of incentive to put all this work into it. You know, there's a reason why people cheer all along the route for the marathon. And don't just say, yeah, we're only going to cheer when you finish. So you want to have something to praise along the way. There are a couple of different formats you can use for the plans. The one on the right, I don't know, right? I'm working on it. Helps you figure out what are your triggers. You know, what are the things that make you how upset? You can recognize that that comes in different sizes. The one on the left is when I feel this anxious, what does it feel like? And what can I do? So you know that, okay, yeah, when I'm feeling butterflies in my stomach, then I can take deep breaths. When I feel like I'm going to die, yeah, we might be a little bit past deep breaths land, and it might be something else I'm doing that. And so recognizing that different levels feel different, and you can do different things to try and keep them from escalating. Now, what the role of all the adults around the kids is, first of all, modeling doing this. Modeling that, yeah, emotional regulation is an ongoing thing that everybody has to practice doing. And I like that quote up there, just saying, you know, sorry for being grumpy. Sometimes I have bad days. It's amazing to me how teachers and other school staff and parents and people in general would rather gaslight the children than just acknowledge that they have feelings. You know, when I was a school nurse, there'd be the times that I'm like trying to get everything done so I might be able to leave remotely close to on time that day. And a kid comes in with an emergency that is so thoroughly not an emergency. And it's like 10 minutes before the end of the day. And you're like, what? And then you kind of realize, oh, I should not let the child's head up and go. I mean, what? As if I didn't say it nasty the first time. You know, like, no, you didn't say anything. I did not bark at you. What are you talking about? No, I'm fine. As opposed to trying to say, I'm sorry. I'm just really mad at this form I'm doing. What do you need? You know, and acknowledging to them that, yeah, because kids are growing up with this idea that when you're an adult, you don't have these emotions anymore because they never see them, except for the kids that see way too much of them, from people who never learned how to manage them. You know, you want the kids to grow up being able to say, hey, that's that thing people can do where they get mad, but they don't get mad. And it works. You can have feelings and manage them in a healthy way. We help the kids by helping them identify, you know, filling in all those details, recognizing what do you see when you're getting upset? What are the early signs? By giving them things to try out, having lots of things on hand that they can practice with and see what works for them, what doesn't, having samples, and then helping them develop what their plan is. It has to be their plan. You might start to get them going, But if we just hand them like, these are the things that you will do to feel better, yeah, that's not gonna work. It has to be their plan. It has to be their ideas. We might be going over what happened in the past. They might not want to go over what happened in the past, so helping them look at that as not, what did you do wrong, that we can figure out what the punishment should be, but how have things gone in the past, and how can we help you develop a sense of control in the future? And then once they have ideas of what will work, finding any staff that are kind of not with the program and wanting the kids to just not doodle. My daughter had a science teacher that did not want any doodling. He'd come and take away the paper. She started doodling on her notes. Complicated her notes. So she started doodling on her arm. He comes around, she goes, seriously? And he had the assignment of bringing in an article from the news about science. And so she brought in the one about how doodling helps you focus and listen better. And then she found out that he does not read those things at all. Not a clue. But we want to help advocate, okay? Help them be able to use things in the classroom. If you got teachers who are like, oh, we can't have those stress balls, you know, we've got a stress ball like that for the kids, all the kids are going to want them. They're cheap. You don't need to have a diagnosis to be able to have a stress ball. And if they're like, well, they start throwing them around. Okay, throwing is the problem, not the ball. If the kid was throwing a pen around, you wouldn't come and say, okay, no more pens for you. Go write your notes. You know, you would say, hey, what is this for? You want to be able to keep using it, right? So could you please use it correctly, or else? Now, we want them to be in the class as much as possible. If you got someone who's like, yeah, that coloring thing is stupid. She's only hearing about maybe 75% of what I say. I say, okay. When that child is awash in anxiety, might be lucky to hear half of what you say. And when they get so overwhelmed that they have to leave the classroom, they hear none of what you say. So 75%, however disappointing that is, might be a real improvement for this kid. So the other thing we need to do is help the kids remember that they've got the strategies. People are always, you know, why did I remember that? Of course you didn't remember it. Because when you need it, you can't remember it. Do not try to keep the information in your head, because when your head needs it, it's not going to be able to access the information. You know, so you have it written down, you have it on cards, and you have other people around you saying, hey, you want me to tell you that when you feel like this, you should try doing that. You know, you're not bossing them. You are the note that they left for themselves. There are a couple different formats that you can put this in. The one on the left is clearly for the small children who like pictures, and the one on the right is for the big children who like words, or don't like words, but are insulted by pictures. But what it does is it collects the information about what are your, you know, predisposing factors. How do we know when you're upset? That one on the right, I actually adapted from one that was on an adolescent unit where I worked, and they would print them on big 11 by 17 paper and have blank ones always there. Kids could pick one up anytime, and if a kid had not done and nothing worked, well, then you should get a new one. Go fill in. Oh, I don't know what happened to. Okay, get a new one. Write it up. And the tradition was, once they filled it out, they printed on the door of their room. Which point my students are like, but what about privacy? So we didn't put it on the door. They did. Peer pressure, social norms, great things to you know, manipulate in their own favor. And people be, but what about? But that's terrible, because then other people wouldn't know what their triggers are. Like, yeah. And they also can define what being a jerk is. You know, you got someone who's upset and goes and slams their bedroom door, and now that kid's losing it because door slams is a trigger for them. You don't even have to say anything, because immediately all the other kids are going, you know that doors bother her. What'd you do that for, you idiot? You know, so it works. Ideally, this would not just be kids who have behavior problems, but everyone could use this. Now, if they're already acting out, I have another whole presentation, managing extreme disruptive behavior. It's sort of the advanced version of this one. Like I said, I developed them based on what people request. And this was, I got an email from a nurse saying, hey, we just joined, it's so great. The principal's so excited. He had 2 quick questions. What do we do when the parents won't follow through on anything? And what do we do when the kids totally destroying the classroom? Like, these are tiny quick questions. questions, okay. I'll get back to you with an entire presentation. But the short summary of it is when they're already kind of having a hard time, that everybody now needs to be having a hard time along with them on. Stay calm. I know that sounds obvious, but it's worth taking a moment to remind yourself of that. Notice that whatever they are doing feels like it will make them feel better. So saying stop says, keep feeling bad. You know, it's like if you got a bee in your shirt or you feel something on your back, maybe it's a bee. And you're like, if someone's like, stop squirming, you'd be like, but what do I do about the sensation I've got? So instead you want to substitute a benign alternative, you know, and it is so that they can get a grip on it. It's not a permanent thing. You know, we had a home daycare and a 3-year-old who was biting the other kids and all hell would break loose. And so I got a pool noodle. Said, when you feel like that, bite this instead. And I told my teacher at the time, because I was in nursing school, that's stupid. You don't want her doing that. You are not biting at all. I'm like, dude, I'm not going to be sending her off to college carrying a pool noodle. Okay. By the end of the week, it looked like we had a little shark. But whenever she started chewing on it, we could calmly come over and check in with her about what she's doing, what's going on, and help her with her feelings. And there was no screaming going on at the time. And go figure, those were more effective conversations. And after a week or two, she didn't even need the noodle. And all the other kids had more skin. It was great. So if they are doing something for attention, don't ignore them. That's just mean. Like, don't make them the center of the universe. You give them attention, but for one person. Quite possibly not the person they would choose. But you give them in a limited, specific way or on a schedule. If it's that they need to move the muscles in some way, then you help them to move those muscles in a safe way. And anything that can be bringing their conscious thought into it helps. So if they're throwing something, okay, try to aim for that square. Or try to get the sticky ball to stick. Or if they're running around, racing them, or counting things, or something like that to make it more, have a little bit of their frontal lobe involved. If they're hitting themselves, say, here, I don't want you to hurt yourself, so hold this while you're hitting yourself. So that if they're face punchers, they do less damage that way. If they're kind of all over the map, having weights can help contain them. You get good at figuring out, is this going to make them more revved up or help blow off the steam? The more you can bring their brain in, the more it will help settle them. So that's where aiming, joining in with them, parallel playing on it, and so on can really help. Now, when they are totally losing it, you know, when they're totally trashing the room, recognize that their brain is gone now. They are not thinking clearly. They might not really be able to process verbal language. So you want to model calmness, not tell them. I mean, you can tell them to be calm, but that might be sort of like you're speaking Greek, and you might as well not. You get rid of the audience, but you make sure you got enough people there. You have just exactly the right number of people. You have all the people you need there, no extras. And a real important thing is you have just one person talking to them at a time. Doesn't have to be like the highest ranking person, just one. Anyone tried cooking and you're learning a new recipe? You got like 5 people there telling you how to do it at the same time. How well does that go? Yeah, so don't do that to the kid either. Have just one person talks to them at a time and everyone else goes through them if you got something else. No other conversation around. So it's very streamlined and simple. Clear, simple instructions to take tangible actions to calm down. Don't just say calm down. I love it when someone's out with like a toddler who's losing it and the parent's like, calm down. As if it didn't occur to them. I mean, it's if they knew what calm was, they'd be doing it. So instead, you might be saying things like, let's take some deep breaths together, or you know, stretch or whatever. Avoid crowding, avoid looming, all those good things. Avoid if-then statements. They're way too complicated, too many moving parts, and too easily heard as a threat. Because if you do this, you get that is very much the same as, and if you don't, you never get to do that again in your entire life. So, but most of all, convey to them that you really want to hear what they are trying to convey. That they're trying to communicate, you do not speak tantrum, and thus you are trying to figure out what they're saying. And sincerely be, you know, I really want to know what you're saying, but it's really distracting that you're swearing at me so much. So could you try that again with a few fewer swear words. Or, you know, until you put that down, it's really hard for me to focus on you. And I really want to focus on you. And then afterwards, you have whatever the results are, be tied with very clear spelled out link to their behavior, not just because I'm in charge. You know, and you need to spell it out. Do not assume it's obvious. If you got a kid who has a meltdown and they're like, okay, now I'm going to get on the bus to go on the field trip, and you're like, no, you aren't. You just had a meltdown. To us, that makes sense. To them, it's just like, and I'm in charge and I'm yanking this away from you. So you say, well, you know, just now there was a good 20 minutes when you could not follow anyone's directions. And no one really feels like that would be very safe out in the community with that. So this field trip you can't go on. But if you're having good, you know, if you're able to follow directions consistently in the future, you'll be able to go on the next one. Now you need to spell it out for them. If you cannot spell it out, if you cannot connect the beads, you need some new consequences then, because if there's no logical connection to the behavior, then, you know, it's just like, it really pissed me off when colleges reopened and kids who like had parties got sent home. I'm like, that is not what we call logic or you know, public health. So having things that make sense, things you want to have around, all these things, anything else you find. And if you don't want to buy them, there are videos coming up. Well, I won't show them, but there are links to them where you can make some of your own that are very fun and very cool. And we are going to be making some of our own. Someone asked where I'd gotten the things. There was, what the community was called, but they closed. It was like Office Playground or something like that. But there's a lot of things out there. Oriental Trading Company is one that has a lot of things. And it's cool when you're in a school because you got to buy like a dozen of them. And that can be annoying, but like the net balls, I love the net balls. Different colors come out. Great, it's so cool. Things like this you can get Oriental Trading Company a lot. But again, finding out what you've got around that you can play with. The sensory mat. I put it over here because it's gross. This is what a sensory mat becomes after several years. Okay. But did you know that glitter floats up? It's kind of cool. Well, I'll get to how to make these things. Let's see. Tactile maze, that's that cloth one over there. Worry stones, all kinds of things, but mostly a welcoming attitude and an open curiosity modeling for the kid of finding out what works. And if it works, then we're going to help make sure that you can do it. And if it doesn't work, then we're going to find something else that does work. You know, you want it to be that the kid can comfortably say, yeah, that did distract me, without feeling like the answer is going to be, see, I told you it was a stupid idea. You should never be doing anything like that. Go back and sit just quietly. But be able to say, yeah, what about it works and what about it doesn't work? So things to make your own. We have the supplies to do this first one, but I will talk through it. You take a bottle of water. Any bottle will do. The ones that are kind of thinner plastic get kind of like that one doesn't feel so great after a while. This one, on the other hand, I was out with my brother and we stopped for water and I'm like, I need that one. Like, you need Norwegian water? I'm like, no, I need the bottle. After I start buying your beverages based on the bottles they're in. And that one's actually cool because it was a fun shape. And my daughter was like, you've got to get the bottles that we have in the Netherlands because they're fun shapes. But you get a bottle, take it down, have it be, whether you're filling it or emptying it, about halfway with water. Okay. Now, all of these are going to ultimately be in here together. So you can put them in any order. But logically, do the food coloring first, because if you need to dilute it, you cannot take anything out. And so you want to add the food coloring and adjust it to get the color you want, because food coloring will dissolve in water and not in the oil. So then you add oil, pour it in gently, and I do have oil with me. Don't use a funnel. When I start bringing the funnel, way more messes, because people forget that it's still in the funnel and they fill the bottle till it's full and then they wonder why it doesn't stop. So then you add anything you want to add. Okay, you can add some glitter, you can add sand, you can add beads, you can add sequins. Don't go overboard with the glitter. It's amazing how very quickly have glitter that it's just like, oh yeah, that's too much glitter. Alternatively, you could make it be pretty much all glitter. If you get glitter glue, dilute it just a little bit, and then you just put one toy in it, and it's like, he's in there somewhere. I can see him. So you add whatever you want, and then you put the cap on as tight as you can. And like I said, there's all kinds of variations. That one over there, I made with a client who really did not want to do anything. And so she's like, I'll show you. And she took the water and then she added glitter glue and the oil. And I'm like, that's so cool. Can I keep this one? She's like, damn, I wanted to screw it up. But it's really neat because it when it blends, it's kind of this milky look. And then it still separates out. So we've got the stuff from that. Let's look at the other things. The next thing we also have stuff for is making your own stress ball. So, no, that's natural one. Where are the blue ones? Hold the ball. Look at them. I threw out some of the ones that had hardened. Okay. So what you're going to do in its pure form is you're going to be filling a balloon with flour. Now, pepper metal balloon, it's kind of hard to get stuff into it. So you want to have a funnel, but you want to have a big funnel. So you take a bottle and you cut it in half, and now you've got a big funnel. You put the balloon over this, you turn it back, you put flour in. You now need to pack the flour in for a while. Squeeze out the air, pack, 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 squeeze out the air. Then, and this is important, when you feel like it's full enough, you hold it tight and dump the flour back out, any extra flour, because otherwise if you pull this off, it goes everywhere. You'll notice this has been used many, many times because there's lots of it. But once you've got it off, then you tie off the balloon. And then you're gonna want at least one more balloon on it. Get high quality balloons like the helium. If you just buy the cheapest ones on Amazon, no. But this is where you need two people, because you need one person to kind of open the balloon and another one to kind of shove it in. It's sort of like childbirth in reverse. So, and you might want to do a third balloon if you know the kid who's going to be playing with this is really going to take that as a challenge. So you can also, one of the balloons has like little nicks in it, so the underneath balloon will show. I didn't do that very well. I think the other balloon needs to be stretched more. So variations you can do is you can put anything in it. You can put all kinds of stuff in there. You can put Play-Doh in it. You can, I have one who mixed flour and oil and made sort of pseudo gooey Play-Doh. If you buy the beads that you can get for, give me that, no, the flamingo. The beads that you can get at a florist and you put them in, they will, be interesting little bead things in there. Has anyone made oobleck? If you put oobleck in it, it's kind of cool. For one thing, you just put the balloon on a funnel and you just kind of pick up the oobleck and it'll run down into it. And you get one where it's hard unless you squeeze it gently. It also eventually dries out though. It's kind of weird. The balloons, I guess, are somewhat porous. So yeah, put anything you want in there. If you have latex allergies and you've got a problem that you cannot have latex things, then you get a nitrile glove. It's the only non-latex thing I found that you can get in a reasonably pouch shape that is still stretchy. So you take the glove, you cut off you knot the fingers, don't bother cutting them off. And then you turn it inside out. First I thought if I then cut off those extra fingers, I could do something with them. And technically you can make a very oblong, yeah, you don't want that, don't do that, no. But, and then you tie the wrist and you've got a nice squeezy toy that is latex free. So various other things you could do. So other ones that I don't have the stuff here. This is the sensory map. This is a very cool thing to do with kids. And then they take it home. Don't keep it with you. Almost always leaks. But you take a Ziploc bag and you get whatever's the cheapest viscous fluid that the pearly ones are really nice. So like a shampoo or a conditioner or soap or something like that, that is a thick liquid. And you put it in and you put some glitter in and some beads, maybe some sequins. Don't get ones that have points. Not very sharp, okay? And then you squeeze out all the air. I have no idea how there's air in this one. And close it up, and then you make a frame of duct tape all the way around. It's pretty duct tape. And then you've got something that's kind of fun to just squish and play with at home, where it won't leak everywhere, or where it will leak everywhere, but not all over the school. But the main thing is, when you've got this thing that's full of this liquid and it's all mixed up, and then it sits there, you come back, all this glitters on the top. It's weird. Glitter like floats up when you put it in thick things. So yeah, that's how that works. What else do we have? Weighted items. I wish I'd remembered to bring them. I'm kind of glad I didn't though, because I didn't have a really tight. That bag is the bag from Harold. But stuffed animals, we are coming up on the season. Right after Easter, you can get as many stuffed animals as you want, really cheap. Also right after Valentine's Day. So you go, you get a stuffed animal, and you open up one of the seams, like on a butt around, and then you put in aquarium gravel. It is the cheapest, clean, heavy thing you can put in there. You can buy walnut shells. You can buy those beads at Joann's if you just really feel like spending money for no apparent reason. If you want to be really, really cheap, cheaper than aquarium gravel is rice, and rice does work, but they swell on humid days, and that's kind of disturbing. So you might not want to do that. And then you just sew shut that little hole. You can, if you want, pull out the stuffing and make the whole bottom be all gravel. But I found when I was too lazy to do that, and I just put the gravel in and I just put it like everywhere, it all settles down eventually. So it'll eventually be that their bottom is the heavy part. To make a weighted blanket, helpful if you got a sewing machine, but you take your cloth and you sew it into like a pillowcase of whatever size, then you sew vertical channels. And then you dump aquarium gravel into each channel and then sew across, and dump and sew across, dump and sew across, so that you end up with a blanket that has cells so the gravel doesn't all go to one corner. Works wonderfully. But as I said, 10% of the person's weight. So figure out the weight, measure the gravel, figure out how many cells you're going to have, and do the math. Don't just go, this looks good, this looks good, look, this is great. It's a glorious, it's a wonderful weighted blanket I've got. And you pick the troublemaker in the class so they can't get up. So, but yeah. And fidgets, there's all kinds of things you can do for fidgets. Somewhere around here is the one with the pipe cleaner. Want to see pipe cleaner beads? Hey, everyone, look at your toys. Pipe cleaner beads. They are not paying attention, are they? Yay, there we go. You can take any pipe cleaner and you put pony beads on it, and you can like have that in your pocket and just be sliding the beads up and down. Because that's all you want from a fidget, is something that you can just slide around. You can have a bolt with a screw on it. You're screwing on and off. If you want to have squeeze balls and you're cheap, you just buy a full noodle and cut it in slices, and now you've got squeeze balls, each hand size. And in the links, there's a lot of really good videos for making all kinds of things out, like stuff around the house. Very cool. I do recommend a knitting or crocheting club, because doing repeated things like that can be very soothing. I saw a unit where we had a kid who had ADHD, and this kid would get like head injuries from bouncing into the ceiling. I mean, he was like Tigger on cocaine all the time. And I taught knitting one day, and I got interrupted. And then at the end, the person who finished the group, by the time I got back, I looked and they had not counted all the supplies. You really don't want yarn and knitting needles running around in the sun unless it's like units. So I kind of freaked out a little bit. And we also realized that this really hyper kid had not been heard of in half an hour. And I'm like, oh, that's bad. He was sitting on his bed knitting. Oh, had not budged. We had not seen him sit still in an awake form ever. So it can be really, really amazing. My daughter and I went to Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago, and they have this competitive calmness exercise where you put on helmets that measure your theta waves. And you sit there across the table, and there's a tube with a marble. And if my brain is calmer than your brain, the marble moves towards the goal on your side. And I'm winning, which makes me excited. So I start to lose. You know? So my daughter and I are sitting there with an unmoving marble halfway between us and having the most intensely boring competition you could ever want. We're just nothing. And after about 2 or 3 minutes, because we both want to stop, but neither one of us is willing to quit, my daughter goes, well, I know what to do. And she reaches in her bag and takes out her headphones and puts on her music. And starts creeping towards me. Well, you can do that. I reached in my bag and took out my knitting. The moment my hands touched the yarn, sank that damn yarn. It's like, my brain's just like, oh. So, and juggling is also very cool. If you get my newsletter, there's a thing about EMDR and alternate side things. Juggling is inherently alternate side. And so it's a really cool skill. It's something kids could be interested in. If you've got a lot of kids with any kind of trauma history, teach them to juggle. And that can really, really potentially keep things flowing through their brain more because it has to go back and forth to the different sides of the brain. So of the various websites, there's lots of websites about how to make things and articles and emotional regulation and yeah. And then the inevitable TED Talks. We always have TED Talks. How to ADHD. Everyone should totally watch everything she makes. And the review of fidget toys is very funny. And then those are the batches of how to make all of those things. It's very, very cool how you can make little fidget things out of virtually nothing. People want me to start looking and having apps because people always want apps. I only do free ones because Calm Harm is great. It is focused on people who struggle with self-harm. So if you've got someone who has not started doing that yet, you might not want to give them this because it might, but if you've got someone who already is struggling with that, what it does is it has a lot of soothing things. And it'll be like, okay, do this for 15 minutes and then see has the urge passed. And it's got things like that breathing one. It's got one where it's like a picture that's all foggy as if there's frost on the glass and you just clear off. It's amazing. And that bottom one, it's a bunch of fidget toys on your phone, which totally should not work. That should not feel like that. Like, the pillows where the sequins, you would think that would not be satisfying to do on your screen, but it so totally is. I did this presentation once and two people in the back, they saw that and 5 minutes later, they're like, well, there goes my evening. So, and a lot of them are free. There's a paid version that has more things, but there's plenty that on the free. If anyone isn't staying to make it, but wants to see the wonderful little video that my daughter made of how to make it, isn't this cute? You do that? Come on. Oh, well, let me, because I made a big screen. Hold on, I gotta make it a smaller screen. There we go. All right, so you got the bottle, you add the food coloring, and you mix it up to get the right color. And then you add the oil, and then you add whatever you want, and then you shake it up. I have found, oddly enough, about 10% of the bottles, for whatever reason, once you shake it up, it emulsifies and does not separate back out. I do not know why. So you just toss that one and do another one. So.
Do you want these little guys in there or are they separate?
Nope, they go in there. Everything goes in there. And this is, you put the balloon on. We're gonna need something to pack the flower in, because I forgot to bring it. And then you tie off the end. And then this is where you need extra hands to